parts of the US East Coast after several days of hazardous air conditions. But many regions are still feeling the effects of Canada's wildfires. The National Weather Service Friday warned of moderate to unhealthy air quality for parts of the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley and Midwest. The agency says conditions should improve over the weekend. Texas is deploying barriers in the Rio Grande River in an effort to deter migrant crossings. Tony Waterman has more.
The first buoy string will stretch 1,000 feet, the massive red round balls measuring 4 feet in diameter. Officials say the buoys will be anchored to the riverbed with netting, preventing anyone from swimming underneath them. The first set will be deployed almost immediately in Eagle Pass, where officials have encountered an uptick in crossings. But Governor Greg Abbott says the ultimate goal is to install miles of the buoys in the Rio Grande. He has accused the Biden administration of not doing enough to prevent illegal crossings.
The French president has condemned the stabbing attack in southeast France that took place on Thursday, leaving 4 children needing intensive care. Ross Cullen has the latest.
Emmanuel Macron said that attacking children was the most barbaric act there is. He was speaking on Friday after visiting Annecy, where an attack took place on Thursday as a man stabbed adults and children in and around a playground in the southeast city in France. The French president also met members of the public who tried to intervene to stop the attack, saying that he was extremely proud of their efforts.
And former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is stepping down as a Member of Parliament, following the release of the Partygate report. The inquiry was examining whether he misled Parliament over whether Downing Street broke COVID lockdown rules. Johnson says the report is an attempt to drive him out. From bureaus worldwide, this is FS.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
Yeah!
It is Free Talk Live. You can join the show here and bring up anything you want. The number is 603-283-6160. Apparently, we weren't streaming to some of our video streaming platforms earlier, including our main one, Odyssey. So sorry to anybody that was waiting for the show there. The number, if you want to join us, 603-283-6160. Just to recap for those just tuning in, the Binance Exchange, Binance.us, their U.S. edition, is being sued by the SEC. We talked about that earlier this week. The developments that you need to know about are that they are now being, there's a request in with the court to put a freeze on all of the assets of the Binance.us exchange, which means all of the customers' assets. So that could be happening any day now. I don't know if they have to wait, 2 weeks or whatever for the other side to file an objection, or if this is like an ex parte kind of thing. I guess we wouldn't have heard about it if it was ex parte.
I would think if it was a secret, or if they wanted to keep it secret, they would have filed it.
So yeah, I don't know if it is an urgent, whatever you call motion in this case, but it doesn't seem like it since nothing has happened in 3 days. So just because nothing has happened yet doesn't mean it isn't going to come down on Monday or over the weekend or whatever. So if I were you, what I would do if I had any funds on the Binance.us exchange, which you shouldn't keep funds on exchanges. This is reason number one. If you're going to use a centralized exchange, what you ought to do is deposit the funds you want to exchange those funds, and then withdraw the funds immediately.
Meaning to your own crypto wallet.
Meaning to your own, thank you, yes, to your own crypto wallet to which you control the keys and no one else does. And then at least you're only risking something bad happening for the short amount of time that you're keeping funds on the centralized exchange. I understand people, they got to swap things, and unfortunately centralized exchanges tend to be the way that people do that these days, even though there are some.
Yeah, there are some decentralized exchanges now.
There are. However, they don't have thousands of tokens or whatever. I think Thorchain's probably up to, I think there's still less than 10 different coins that you can swap there, and it's coming along. There's definitely some exciting decentralized exchanges out there.
Well,
it's worth looking into.
Part of the problem is that there's not enough people doing that, right?
Yeah, there needs to be more volume.
So that's why people need to switch and go in that direction.
Absolutely.
So that they're not putting their assets at risk.
So that's happening now. if you've got an account on Binance.us, you really should consider emptying it as soon as possible. There is no benefit to you. Okay, you're not going to be a winner in this lawsuit. Okay, if the SEC loses against Binance.us, and right now they've got a winning record against cryptocurrency. We've been following the LBRY case here pretty closely, SEC versus LBRY, that's LBRY.com. We've been following that pretty closely here on Free Talk Live. LBRY lost that case. They shouldn't have, but the federal judge in the District Court of New Hampshire decided that LBRY token was a security.
Well, I mean, in other cases, one of the judges thought, not LBRY, but Bitcoin was, the blockchain was a person too. So,
yes, that's right.
I mean, you're going up against a beast where the judge basically doesn't. These judges don't understand what it is that they're ruling on.
No, they don't. But in the case of LBRY, they've been absolutely destroyed financially, and so they don't have any money to appeal that decision. So that one's going to stand. Now, the SEC is also suing Ripple and has been going after them for years. We are waiting on the verdict in that particular case. And of course, the Ripple people, they're like a lot of the crypto people out there, there's this cult phenomenon that gets sort of generated around popular cryptocurrencies. So there's a Ripple cult. And there's a bunch of people out there that they believe so hard that this judge in the Ripple case is going to rule in their favor.
They are definitely convinced.
And I hope they're right. That would be great. It would at least go against the LBRY case and maybe give us some contradicting court decisions in the federal court system.
You know what it feels like?
But I'm not optimistic.
It feels like some of the more out there legal arguments, right? And that's what it feels like to me with the Ripple case, right? Like with people saying, well, you should have just argued it differently or argued a different point. And I don't know. Like I'm a little skeptical because I'm not used to seeing wins,
Nope, me neither. So, I mean, don't hold your breath on that particular case. That's another big one that's in play. And, of course, the SEC is coming after Coinbase. It's coming after Binance. And so my point was, even if Binance somehow magically defeats the SEC with all of its taxpayer dollars, that, of course, costs them nothing to bring these lawsuits against these companies that will be potentially ruinous to the companies. If Binance wins this case and you didn't withdraw your funds from the Binance exchange, then all you'll get later is the ability to withdraw your funds, 3 years later.
Maybe.
If they haven't spent them on lawyers or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's no benefit to you to stay in this thing.
It's the other thing that's interesting about these cases is people, I don't think a lot of people understand, like, when you're going up or when you have any kind of criminal or civil case where there's the government involved as an opposing party, you're in this situation where they've got hundreds of people, we got dozens of lawyers who might be working on the case, and all these other folks investigating and all this, and what do you have? I mean, in the best case scenario, what was OJ? OJ had like 20 lawyers or something like that.
It was at least half a dozen.
But that was like the best case scenario. Most people have one lawyer, right? So even if Ripple has a dozen lawyers, they're still, they're still at a severe disadvantage.
Yep. Oh, by the way, this hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is a cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. And big fans of cryptos that are actually useful here on Free Talk Live. In fact, Bitcoin, which is, of course, the big coin in the world of cryptocurrencies, is pretty much useless for buying things because its fees are insane. If you want to buy something with Bitcoin, you may be paying $1 or $2 in fees on a median fee. You may pay even more than that. It's possible, depending on how busy the network is. But right now, it's pretty typical to see $1 or $2 fees on Bitcoin from the charts that I've looked at online. And that is impossible. Like, that is completely unjustifiable for somebody that wants to make a small purchase. If you're going to buy a cup of coffee for $3 and it's a $2 fee on top of that, you're not going to spend the Bitcoin. So you got to have something else. You got to have something that's actually useful, something with a very, very low fee, and that is Dash. Their fees are typically far less than 1 cent per transaction. And Dash has implemented some really cool features to make sure it is undefeated as the most useful cryptocurrency in the marketplace. From a technical standpoint, Dash transactions are irreversible, and its network is protected from 51% attacks by their Chainlocks technology. There's no need to wait for a confirmation before considering a Dash transaction complete, so it's great for merchants. And Dash is, by the way, one of the oldest cryptocurrencies out there. It's widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get. It's easy to use Dash. You can start by learning more at Dash.org. And big thanks to the Dash Decentralized Autonomous Organization for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. You can visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. That is Dash.org. Let's go to the phones here. We got Ricky on the line in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Ricky, you're on Free Talk Live.
Thank you there, brother Ian. Would that be Chris who's over there? Who is that?
Yeah, it is Chris.
Hey, brother Chris. All right, well, tonight's going to be something a little different. It's funny, the last time I talked about Gnosticism was 2015. I never talked about it again with you and Daryl because I thought it wasn't appropriate, how times have changed. Nonetheless, concerning last night's caller, I believe his name was Tim. Now, he was right and wrong about a lot of things. I want to clarify that from listeners from a high-level Gnostic's point of view. Now, concerning the book of Revelation, we'll start with the easiest one first. Now, he mentioned about the number 666 referring to Nero. Well, he's kind of right, but not right. You see, in the canonized Bible, it does say in the book of Revelation, listen, to those who understand, this is wisdom. And then it gives the number of the beast, 666. Now, my answer, that's probably wrong because it was around 2007 that we found an incredible archaeological find. It was somewhere where they have these texts, and it was in a scrap pile. And what it turned out to be was a second draft of a page of the book of Revelation. And what it had is 6, and then it had the middle number, 1 digit off, and then 6. Now, what we were able to do is compare that to another document, was draft number 1. This was incredibly rare that said 666 with the 6 crossed out. Now, when you use that number, you can check into this. This is documented fine. The number that I mentioned with the new number on the second draft, that's the one that points to Nero. The 666 doesn't.
Okay. I don't see why anyone really cares about this.
Well, here's the interesting part, though, that I find fascinating. The book of Revelation is the only book of the ancient text we do know an exact date because it was hand-delivered and said to be read out loud. But the fascinating thing is he's wrong about saying about at the time of Nero. It actually predates that. It predates both Christianity and Nero, and which I find fascinating. You know, and
are there not like a lot of religious talk shows you can call?
Well, no, I was just okay. So this isn't interesting, you know.
No, it sounds really boring to me.
I'm falling asleep here. No offense, but I just.
Why should anyone care about this?
Well, because what I find fascinating is, yes, they did shift the timeline. And why would somebody deliberately shift the timeline from the time period to now? Simple example.
The timeline of what?
The new world. So people like, whether it be the United States and all of that, would now be looking at this. It was written for the time period. That is correct. And there's like a lot of things. You know, it's very sad. And there are people that say that the book of Revelation is a Gnostic
What's very
text.
sad?
Huh?
You said it's very sad. What is sad?
I think it's sad that, you know, people like the Catholic Church and others over time will take this book and pervert the timeline just so it fits today's time period, where it was obviously never written for it.
You're talking about the Bible, just to be clear. You're talking about the Bible here?
Book of Revelation.
Okay.
And, you know, another thing, too, at the end of the book of Revelation, it says about people who change the words of this book, blah, blah, blah. People look and think it's the whole Bible. No, it's referring to a single book, the Revelation.
So are you like a Christian or something?
No, I'm Gnostic.
And what does that mean?
Gnostics were individuals at the time. We now know them as the Essenes. But see, Gnostics are those that believe in esoteric knowledge and mysticism. Mm-hmm. You know, Aria, I guess, knows all about it, you know. The captain said I should talk to her about it. I talked about this back in 2015. Right. You know, one thing we have common, me and Aria, Christians both think we're evil.
All right. Hey, thanks for the call tonight, Ricky. I appreciate it. I can't take any more of it. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. I think some religious discussions can be interesting, but not like biblical dating, numerology.
I mean, it's a pretty. I mean, this is a general kind of show. It's not like you're not going to be talking to people or having people listen necessarily that are going to be like, I don't know.
Well, I'm happy to talk about like theological questions or issues, the nature of
but
the
he's
universe.
getting into the weeds, man.
Yeah, and they're just talking about dates. It's really, really dull. The number here is 603-283-6160. So I don't think there's really anything else to share about the Binance story, but get your assets out if you possibly can. The number again, 603-283-6160. So another story that I had here tonight, Chris, is in regards to Americans, specifically younger Americans, and how many of them are all about the nanny state. How many of them are all about Big Brother, as Reason.com puts it, in their own houses? According to a recent study,
98%.
No. It's not that bad. I mean, it's bad, but it's not that bad.
Okay.
Here's a story from Reason.com.
Let's hear the numbers.
The good news is that only a minority of younger Americans favor Big Brother-style surveillance of our home life. The bad news is we're discussing this because it's disturbingly large, a share supporting such a totalitarian intrusion. Worse, the idea seems to be gaining acceptance. We either need to get a handle on what's going on here or else potentially suffer lives monitored by unblinking eyes of the state imposed by popular demand. According to Cato Institute, quote, Americans under the age of 30 stand out when it comes to 1984-style in-home government surveillance cameras. 3 out of 10 Americans, roughly 29% of Americans under the age of 30, favor, quote, the government installing surveillance cameras in every household in order to, quote, reduce domestic violence, abuse, and other illegal activity. Quote, support declines with age, dropping to 20% among 30 to 44-year-olds and dropping considerably to 6% among those over the age of 45. So that's pretty disturbing, that if you've got friends who are in the millennial or more so Gen Z, it's mostly Gen Z, it's under 30. I think Bonnie she just turned 27, and so she's on the borderline of Gen Z and millennial. So if you're under 30, you're either a very old millennial, or you're Gen Z, basically. So it's a very, very, very disturbing number here. The survey in question focused on central bank digital currencies, government-sponsored alternatives to digital money such as Bitcoin. CBDCs would offer the convenience of digital payments, but potentially without privacy protections, and could empower the state to control what people buy and sell. And absolutely will, if they implement it. And right now, we're still waiting to see if they actually approve a CBDC here in the United States. They are testing CBDC software, so the ball is sort of rolling on this, but it hasn't actually been approved by Congress to be implemented. Whether that comes sooner or later, we will certainly let you know. But interestingly, more than half of those who support the United States adopting a CBDC are also supportive of government surveillance cameras in homes. So if you agree with the CBDC, then there's a good chance you also think 53% of those people think it's a great idea to have a government surveillance camera in all homes.
This is how we ended up with breathalyzers in every car.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's coming soon. We talked about that last week.
We just talked about it. Yeah. Just last Friday on this show.
This suggests there may be a common consideration that is prompted by both issues. Likely it has to do with willingness to give up privacy in the hopes of greater security. If that's the case, it may be a growing willingness to prioritize security over privacy. Note, not just the 29% for in-home surveillance among the youngest cohort, but also the 20% support among those aged 30 to 44. And now you're talking about the millennials as well here. So 1 out of 5 millennials is supporting government monitoring in every home. 6% support among older cohorts is a sort of random approval for any crazy idea you'd expect to see in a population. The jump to 20% and then 29%, though, looks like something different. But what? Psychologist Clay Routledge, the vice president of research and director of the Human Flourishing Lab at the Archbridge Institute, said, quote, "I think there are two ways to think about this new finding from Cato, and both can be true at the same time and may even be connected. The first is a story of technology driving changing attitudes. Younger generations have grown up with less privacy than older generations."
Oh, yeah. Buses, cameras. Schools, cameras.
Mm-hmm.
The computers, the computers that, kids are using,
cameras.
They're bugged.
He says younger generations have grown up with less privacy because of technological trends related to smartphones, social media. So this finding may represent a greater comfort with more surveillance as a result of how they grew up. But the problem, of course, is it's also a result of ignorance of what the nature of the state is, right? Because when I walk into a Walmart and I see myself on the little camera TV that shows, you're being watched, right? They got that in a lot of these Walmarts.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't bother me because I know Walmart isn't going to use, the video that they get to send men with guns to my home and put a gun to my head to demand things from me. The government does that. The people calling themselves the state of fill in the blank or the federal government.
I'm not sure that there's no danger or concern there, but I think that the real danger, the bigger danger, is in the connection of these sorts of devices to the government.
Sure.
Right? It's not so much, it's not so much like, for example, tolls are a good example. It's not so much that you have a means of paying through an electronic system. It's that if you don't want to pay through an electronic system, you don't have a choice, and that will be used against you in court at a later point. And it is being used against people, in court, beyond the scope of what it wasn't even intended.
So I understand why, people may feel more comfortable with being open or seeing surveillance around. But the evil comes in when, as you said, these systems become connected to the state. And then they can be used to file charges against you for things you didn't know were illegal, victimless things.
Crimes that you didn't even commit, for that matter.
Sure. And, the idea of taking surveillance into the home just really shows how far people have gone and lost, any kind of connection to the value for privacy. Again, it's still less than a third, but it's a significant number to say, roughly 3 out of 10 young people and 1 out of 5 millennials are supporting this. The second here, he says, is a story of mental health driving changing attitudes. Younger generations are more anxious, and when people are anxious, they become more likely to privilege security over freedom. So this finding may represent a greater comfort with less freedom as a result of greater mental distress. Have these people considered the distress they're going to be under when a bearcat smashes through their front door and a SWAT team comes in and shoots their dog or throws a grenade in their baby's crib?
The crazy thing is you can already set up your own security camera and funnel it to the police. It's
true.
called, I'm trying to think.
Amazon Ring lets you do that, right?
Yep, something like that. I forget exactly what the name of it is, but Amazon has a product to do that. It's yeah.
But they're worried about other people. They want to force it down everyone's throat. And these explanations might be connected because the growing surveillance culture and social media more broadly may be contributing to higher rates of anxiety, which ironically may lead to greater support for more surveillance, leading to more anxiety.
How? I don't even understand this. I would think the anxiety would come from cameras in your home, not from there not being. Are you more afraid of the people that you live with than you are of the government? Because that's a really, really bizarre. I don't even understand how you can be more afraid of the people you live with than the government. The government got unlimited resources. Okay, they use violence on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean it's bewildering to me that close to 1 in 3 young people could have a position like this. If you are out there and you know people like this, you want to call in and share any conversations you've had, or maybe you are somebody that thinks that there should be government surveillance cameras inside people's homes, everyone's home. That's the proposal in this question. The number here, if you want to join the show, is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. This is something. This whole anxiety thing is something that I've been critical of for years on Free Talk Live. I don't remember. I mean, you're close to my age, Chris. Do you remember growing up in the 90s, going to school? Do you remember having classmates who were always talking about how anxious they were, how anxious and depressed they were?
No.
No, I didn't ever have that happen. But you hear it all the time.
Seems very
now.
bizarre to me.
But now you hear it all the time from young people. It's like,
or you hear it from the media, at least, I think.
No, you actually hear it from young people. Like, it's out there as this thing that it's just a normal thing now for young people to be anxious all the time.
I don't know that many young people, so I don't know. I definitely can't say I have any firsthand experience, interacting with somebody who has said they have high anxiety like that. I mean, I think that people have anxiety. I just don't know if it's any higher than it was.
Well, I mean, everybody can get anxious, right? Like if you're excited about a thing that's going to happen, you're going to get an award at work or something like that. You have to give a speech or whatever. You might have some anxiety about a thing that's going to happen to you. But these people are constantly anxious. They're just always anxious about something. They're anxious when they get up in the morning. They're anxious when they go to bed at night. I mean, it's just, I can't even understand living this way. But why anyone who is anxious constantly would think that the government's going to make that better for them by putting a video camera in their home? I mean, what? The number here is 603-283-6160. If you want to join the show, you can bring up whatever you want. It's Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. Charges facing former US President Donald Trump have been released in relation to handling of classified documents at his private estate. The 37-count indictment was made public on Friday, a day after Trump was charged in the case in a federal court in Miami. Special counsel Jack Smith has encouraged a speedy trial and says Trump is innocent until proven guilty. Sally Patterson reports.
Donald Trump is charged with unauthorized possession of classified material, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and making false statements to law enforcement. The indictment says the former president hid documents which related to US nuclear weapons and military operations, material which could, quote, put at risk the national security of the United States. It also alleges Trump stored official documents in a ballroom, bedroom, and even a bathroom at his Mar-a-Lago club in Florida. Trump has called the indictment election interference at the highest level and argues he is innocent.
Skies are clearing across parts of the US East Coast after several days of hazardous air conditions. But many regions are still feeling the effects of Canada's wildfires. The National Weather Service Friday warned of moderate to unhealthy air quality for parts of the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley and Midwest. The agency says conditions should improve over the weekend. Texas is deploying barriers in the Rio Grande River in an effort to deter migrant crossings. Tony Waterman has more.
The first buoy string will stretch 1,000 feet, the massive red round balls measuring 4 feet in diameter. Officials say the buoys will be anchored to the riverbed with netting, preventing anyone from swimming underneath them. The first set will be deployed almost immediately in Eagle Pass, where officials have encountered an uptick in crossings. But Governor Greg Abbott says the ultimate goal is to install miles of the buoys in the Rio Grande. He has accused the Biden administration of not doing enough to prevent illegal crossings.
The French president has condemned the stabbing attack in southeast France that took place on Thursday, leaving 4 children needing intensive care. Ross Cullen has the latest.
Emmanuel Macron said that attacking children was the most barbaric act there is. He was speaking on Friday after visiting Annecy, where an attack took place on Thursday as a man stabbed adults and children in and around a playground in the southeast city in France. The French president also met members of the public who tried to intervene to stop the attack, saying that he was extremely proud of their efforts.
And former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is stepping down as a Member of Parliament, following the release of the Partygate report. The inquiry was examining whether he misled Parliament over whether Downing Street broke COVID lockdown rules. Johnson says the report is an attempt to drive him out. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the agonies of a Republican politician seeking to challenge Donald Trump for the party's presidential nomination, despite a long track record of slavishly backing him. Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, was one of several Republicans announcing presidential campaigns this week. Back in 2016, as governor, he was one of the first prominent Republican-elected lawmakers to back Trump in his quest for the presidency. Now, he says, he got it wrong.
What I was hoping to do by endorsing him early, recognizing that he had won in New Hampshire, he had won in South Carolina, and almost won in Iowa. He was the nominee. And I thought as a longtime friend, I could make him a better candidate and a better president. I was wrong.
He certainly changed his tune. Here was Chris Christie on the stump this week.
He is, for those of you who read the Harry Potter books, like Voldemort, who never admits a fault and who always finds someone else and something else to blame for whatever goes wrong. And there's this thing like, Christie doesn't really care about winning. All he cares about doing is destroying Trump. Now let me ask you something. How are those two things mutually exclusive? I am going out there to take out Donald Trump, but here's why. I want to win.
He has a long road ahead of him, garnering just 1% of support among Republican voters at the beginning of a 2024 primary process in which Donald Trump is still the runaway leader. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
FSN is an independent source of news for TV, radio and digital networks worldwide. You can find more of our minute-by-minute updates on Twitter. Follow us there at Feature Story. And we have a wealth of audio and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denzelo reporting.
Now that multiple Thomas E. Dewey High School sources have confirmed that junior Jessica Milley will soon begin putting out, with many speculating that she'll go all the way with her boyfriend Josh Gibson as early as this Friday, Milley's classmates have been quick to weigh in on the news.
Jessica was sitting at this table when she told Erica that she was finally going to do Josh.
Jessica's pretty hot, so I'm happy with her decision.
I was pretty certain the next girl to start putting out would be Amy Courtley because everybody knows her mom's a slut.
While the majority of students were somewhat surprised that Jessica might give it up at Andy Wheeler's house party this Friday, possibly on one of Wheeler's 2 basement couches, Milley's intentions didn't come as a shock to some. Now that the news is settling in, several Dewey High sources are suggesting that Milley's decision could cause a domino effect in which even more classmates begin putting out in the near future.
I think I'm going to start putting out in January or February, definitely by prom.
Keep checking theonion.com for more news as this story progresses.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and of course, you can join the show. Bring up anything you want. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. If you appreciate what we do here on Free Talk Live, then we would appreciate it if you directly support the program by joining our AMPS program, as Dominic Bashford has done. He is a silver level supporter of AMPS. AMPS stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. It's a way for you to get behind what we do here 7 nights a week on Free Talk Live, on broadcast radio, on podcast, live streaming, and satellite over Africa as well. So thank you to everybody who supports the show through the AMPS program at amps.freetalklive.com. That's where you can get signed up through our Patreon. If you don't like Patreon, we have an option for you. You can go to video.freetalklive.com to our Odyssey channel and click join at the top of the page there, and then you can sign up with your debit card or credit card that way as well. So you got more than one way to support the show directly. Once again, try amps.freetalklive.com or video.freetalklive.com. It's Ian and Chris here tonight. We've got Major Payne on the line talking about a disturbing number of Americans of a younger age, the younger set of Americans, those under the age of 30. It's about 3 out of 10, 29% of them that say that Americans should have government camera systems inside everyone's homes. And when you increase the age from...
Does that include the bedroom?
I don't know if they got that detailed with the questions, but since in homes pretty bad, whether it's in your bedroom or your bathroom or your kitchen, it's still pretty disturbing.
Wow.
And then it's 20% of those 30 to 44-year-olds. So millennials, 20% of them, 1 out of 5, say, yeah, bring the government cameras in. My house, your house, everyone's house. Major Payne, you're on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure they even equipped the Tidy Bowl man with his own little boat camera. It's in your toilet now.
I don't even like having cameras on the outside of my house, let alone inside, right? Like.
So anyway, you think back about this. You're talking about people 30 and under, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
It was about 20 years ago that the inner tube took deep root on society.
Yeah.
And what I'm bringing up is the stress of the mother during the pregnancy. Speaking of which, here goes the cops flying by my frickin' house.
Okay.
Yep. Can you hear them?
I heard them. Yeah, I hear them.
They're there.
All right, what else?
There they are.
Just try to ignore them. Go ahead.
Oh, hell, they're going deep after somebody. They're riding 3-4 deep. I ain't even got the window open, but I can tell by the noise.
As long as they're not rolling up in your front yard, we'll just keep the call going, all right?
They've done that before, but they don't do with that with lights blaring. They want to catch you with your underwear on.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so
anyway,
what else, man?
So when the mother is in a stressful situation during pregnancy, she is much more likely to throw a hyperactive or even... what are they? ADHD? They used to call it.
Yeah.
And you just think about the deer and the domestic stock of the world. When you're born in the wild and there's always something trying to eat you, you got to learn to be hyper vigilant, or you ain't going to survive.
Okay, I mean, I could see that. I could see that as a creature who could be exterminated by a lion or a tiger around every corner. That could cause a little bit of anxiety. I could understand that. But in today's society, you don't face those kind of dangers. The biggest danger young people are going to face is they're looking at their phones. They're walking around. They might smack themselves into a telephone pole or something like that.
And that is the danger, is the eternal stress on the young teenager trying to be accepted on this internet society where everybody just goes,
the crazy thing I find about that is it's so much easier, I think, online than it is in the real world. Like, there's different communities that you can participate in, right? Like, you're not forced to participate.
That's true.
On just Facebook with like your other peers in your local area.
That's true. Yeah, you can select your community.
So wide and so broad. If you have a topic, something of interest, right? Like, for example, I'm into technology, so I would go onto technology forums, right? Like, you don't have to go on Facebook. You can find something you're interested in,
right? That's a great point.
Find friends and make friends.
Well, the thing is these kids, they want to be accepted, So the little fishes they swim with to school, and kids are cruel. Hell, they was cruel when I was in school, and now you got them just talking with their thumbs, where you can't even stick your tongue out at them or tell them you're full of beans, or it's just here's my opinion and that's that.
Yeah, if you're not on the phone, you don't exist to young people.
And you know what else? You can, like, the crazy thing is, like, teenagers back in my day, you couldn't just block somebody. Now you can hit the block button, right? Like, I just don't get it.
Yeah, I really don't either. But if you're out there and you want to weigh in, feel free. What else, Major?
First time I had a little teenage girl, maybe 15 years ago, put her hand up in my face and say, "Talk to the hand, because the face ain't listening." I about wanted to slap that child. It's like, what? Get back in your sandbox, you stupid infant.
Major, thanks for the call tonight. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Maybe you are out there using this technology and you have some kind of explanation. Is it the technology that is causing the anxiety? Because I'm on the internet all the time. You're on the internet all the time, Chris. Now, to be fair, you aren't on any major social media sites, but I'm on Twitter.
Yeah, but you know what? I am on platforms that other people in my community are on, in the same sense that if somebody was on Facebook, they're probably interacting with people. I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong here because I don't use Facebook, but they're interacting with other people, like maybe at their school or at their job or something, right?
Presumably.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You don't use Facebook either.
But my point is that, I have used Facebook. It's been 5 years, but I did use it at one time for most of a decade, I think, of my life. And I wouldn't say it caused me anxiety at any point. It caused me some annoyance.
Yeah,
because,
annoyance is probably a better word for it.
But anxiety, no. But maybe, again, I'm in my 40s, right? So I didn't have the same experience growing up as the younger set, and I'm like you on this one, Chris. It's hard for me to relate to why these people are so anxious, and further, why they would support government monitoring of their homes. Let's continue with the story here from Reason.com, looking at a study by the Cato Institute, which they link to here, and I've actually pulled that up. It's pretty interesting. It's about CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies. We can talk about that in a moment. But they interviewed this psychologist, Clay Routledge, who is the vice president of research and director of the Human Flourishing Lab at the Archbridge Institute. He was the one who was making this theory that he believes that younger generations are more anxious because of internet, basically. He has been following these developments for years. In 2017, while teaching at North Dakota State University, he wrote a piece for the New York Times examining survey results revealing declining support for free speech and democracy among younger adults. He worried that years of safety-obsessed parenting and schooling promoted a, quote, culture of victimhood that made children anxious and fearful. Those children then carried their concerns forward into adulthood. Now, that makes sense to me.
That makes a lot of sense to me too. I totally get it. It's interesting. I grew up, I think, in an era when I was younger that didn't have that safety, thing. And then somehow in my teenage years, it kind of became big.
Right.
And it was like, okay, you're now concerned about like what movies I watch. Or, like when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, nobody cared. But now that I'm a teenager, people care. Like,
did your parents fall into that trap?
It was just a general thing. Like
it was in society, but it didn't affect your family?
Like I remember going to the movies and watching R-rated movies when I was younger. No problem, no parents. And then the first time I think I ever encountered, like, as an example, I went to a movie theater in Boston when I was like 13, and I couldn't get into an R-rated movie. It was the first time I'd ever been carded to get into an R-rated movie. And I just was like, what is this? What are you talking about? You want to see my ID? Like, I just didn't understand that because I hadn't been babied to death.
So you were able to get into R-rated movies before the age of 13 with no parental.
There was a theater down the street. It was like, it wasn't a big theater. It was like 7 or 8 screens, and I could you go, no problem.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but this was in the we're talking about the early 90s as opposed to the late 90s, and the late 90s is when it seemed to become more of a there was more babying going on. I feel like.
I think maybe it was just I didn't even consider trying it as a young person.
Were you like in a suburb? Did you have to drive to get to the theater? So there may be some other factors here, right? Like if you had to drive to get to a theater, you probably had to have some adult with you, so it wasn't an issue. But if you were able to get to the theater yourself on a bike or just walking there,
I think it probably had to do with whoever it was that ran that theater in your particular case, that they just didn't care.
But the same thing was true with like VHS and DVD rentals. Like it wasn't until a teenager that I ever had a problem renting. Like R-rated movies.
Interesting.
Like same thing. And the funny thing about that was they would sell me, like Blockbuster would sell me an R-rated movie without ID, but they wouldn't rent me the movie.
It's ridiculous.
I was just like, really? Like you will let me buy the movie for a few dollars more, but you won't rent the same movie to me. Well, I actually had that happen once at a Blockbuster.
Yeah, that's crazy. But the whole this parental, what's the term? Helicopter parenting. That's the thing. That came out when we were doing the show almost 20 years ago. This idea of the helicopter parent, the parent that was always hovering.
Yeah.
They're always there. Wherever their kids are, they're always paying attention.
You got to call the friend's parent before, you'll let your kid go play with that other kid. It, like that's just crazy to me. Like, I understand that, like, there are some bad parents out there or there's some bad kids, but like that you have to, I actually had a friend. Well, I don't know if I'd call him a friend, but when I was younger, there was somebody I knew who actually had a parent who would call and insist on meeting up with the other parents before they would allow their kid to play with like the friend or whatever. It was just, I just did not, I don't understand that level of like paranoia.
Yeah, I could understand the reasoning for that because, if you are concerned with what your kid's going to run into, and some parents are more concerned about like, let's look at like a Christian parent, for instance. They may not want their kids going over and watching movies that they would not normally want them to watch. These are a little more controlling types of parents.
Yeah, control freaks.
But I can understand why they would want to meet those parents. And you also wouldn't want your kid going into like, a dirty trailer or something like that. They're going to get some sort of infection or whatever from being there. So I could understand that.
But you can react to that situation too, once you've learned about it. You don't have to take the step of watching and like logging on a GPS device like every I don't know. Like when I was little, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have these devices that would let parents, watch every place. If your kid didn't get home, at 6:00 or whatever, you'd be pulling out like trying to figure out where they were. It's like, okay, it's not yet dark. Give it another couple of hours before you start freaking out.
Yeah, there's a really great website called Free Range Kids. I haven't been to it for some time, but the lady that created the site and the organization, Lenore Skenazy, we've had her on the show before. She was the lady who made headlines probably more than a decade ago, maybe like 15 years ago. I don't know how long it's been, but sometime. She made headlines for being, quote unquote, the world's worst mother, because in New York City, she allowed her, I think then 8 to 10-year-old son to take a bus home from school.
Oh my God.
By himself.
Really?
Yeah. Like a big boy, right? Like you know, you take the bus.
I mean, this is not
the school bus.
Yeah, I get it. I get
bus,
it. This
right?
is not that abnormal. In many, in probably most of the world, this is normal.
Yes.
Or at least it was a decade ago.
Right, and that's the thing. Well, that's the thing. It's been probably at least 20 years that this whole safety society thing, or safetyism is a newer term that I've heard for it, has been pushed heavy.
I knew somebody who was a bit younger than me, probably like maybe 8 to 10 years younger than me, whose parent would not let them have friends because like they they weren't allowed to leave the house because of this whole paranoia, the safety paranoia.
That's insane.
Yeah.
This was how long ago?
Like 7 to 10 years younger than me.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, just that's so that I think.
But this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like we're talking about the 90s, early 2000s. That's when this paranoia I think really started to come into play. I mean, when I was younger, like nobody rode around with like helmets and knee pads and all that stuff. I mean, kids, they get scraped up, but for the most part they'd be all right.
Yep.
And
for the most part.
and then they started passing these
helmet laws,
seatbelt law, all of these things where I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I don't necessarily think you need a law. And you certainly, I think it's you've just gone overboard when you're so paranoid.
Yeah, I think that this psychologist is correct on this one, that the constant nannying, the constant surveillance, the lack of freedoms, the restrictions, the rounding off of all the corners, mandating helmets, all this safetyism has absolutely had an effect on the younger generations. I think that's a good theory. It's something we've been talking about for years here on Free Talk Live. He says, in short, fear causes people to privilege psychological security over liberty. And of course, what is it that the government does best? It gives you reasons to be afraid. The government wants you to be in a state of fear, because then you will turn to them as the solution to whatever the problem is. Whether it's drug dealers from the 80s and the 90s, whether it's terrorists from 2001 through 2018 or whatever, and whether it's COVID from 2020 or domestic terror, quote unquote, which is the new thing now, and climate change, we got to be afraid of that. They've been pounding that in on the kids for the last 20 years as well.
It's even longer than that.
Yeah, but they didn't do it like pounding when I was growing up. Like it was there maybe, but
they did in New Jersey.
Did they?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know in elementary school the climate change thing was I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's worse now, but
I bet you it is.
It was definitely there.
Yeah, I think it's a lot worse now than it was for you then. Let's go to the phones here. We got Tim on the line in Florida. Tim, you're on Free Talk Live with Ian and Chris.
He said, "Lose your assets."
He's talking about crypto.
Lose your assets.
What about losing them though? I'm sorry. What?
Oh no, you just said lose your assets. It's like a Beavis and Butthead joke.
Sorry, I don't remember saying it, so I
don't
apologize.
know the reference either.
Yeah.
No, it's all right. Actually, what I called about the conversation you're talking about.
Which one?
Well, the nanny state. I think the introduction of SSRIs had a lot to do with this, and like the overdiagnosing of mental disorders, probably starting in about the late 90s. And yeah, it basically comes from the psychiatric industry, where they basically just once you start giving a kid medication for anxiety, and he's going to the psychiatrist every once or twice a week, and he's getting mollycoddled. Yeah, he gets trained, basically into this industry. It becomes almost like a religion. If he accepts it, if he rejects it, he throws away his meds, and he just doesn't.
That's a good point. I mean, what your parents say to you when you're growing up is what is the truth, right? And if you are growing up with these overprotective parents that are constantly telling you, you got to look out. Oh my God, you might get kidnapped, or whatever it is that they would say to these kids.
That's such a rare thing. That parents are so freaked out by kidnapping, and it never happens. It never happens. The only kidnapping that really happens is when there's like a divorce situation and the other parent they call that kidnapping. Yeah. So that's why you have
you
like
factor
a statistic,
that out.
Right?
You factor that out, and it's like down to zero, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Somebody was saying the other day about the Jay Noon and Shallon trial that we've been discussing on the air, where they were charged, or she was charged with, quote, child endangerment for leaving their 2-year-old in the car, air conditioning on, nice day outside, not hot or anything.
Low 70s, but I think we found out it was a high of 70,
68 or 70 or something.
Like, I'm surprised the air conditioning was even on.
But it was, and strapped into the car seat. And there's somebody online who was claiming, a supposed Bitcoin libertarian in New Hampshire was trying to hold me to task on this, claiming that it was a danger to the child because it could get out of the car seat and drive the car, or that it could or somehow hurt itself.
Can't even reach the pedals. How is he going to drive the car?
I don't think they said drive it, but somehow hurt themselves in the car.
I'm sorry, but...
or get kidnapped. And I was like, this is New Hampshire. Okay. We're talking about. Your kid's not going to get kidnapped out of a car. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
The car was locked.
Yes.
Second of all, you have a situation where that maybe could happen, but wouldn't it be the parent who knows whether or not their kid is capable of getting out of the car seat? Yeah. If they're not capable of getting out of the car seat because they're strapped in, it's not a danger. You're imagining dangers that don't exist, and then convicting based on that.
Exist.
What's that?
I'm sorry, but the danger that does exist is the busybodies that end up calling the police.
Yes.
So if you know this, don't leave your kid in the car.
But maybe she thought she was in New Hampshire where people actually respected other people's freedoms. Unfortunately, it turned out this woman who called the cops works for the police. She works for the county attorney, and so she's absolutely a total Karen.
Well, and the craziest thing about this is there's no law that says you can't leave your kid in the car for a few minutes.
That's true.
Right.
And she didn't leave the kid in the car for any length of time. The car
less than an hour.
The car was still on. Well, the car was still on. The air conditioning was still on, and her car apparently turns off after 15 minutes.
It was a remote start. Yeah.
Yeah, and if
15
you listen,
to 25.
If you listen to the witnesses during, and I was at this trial, if you listen to the witnesses, it was anywhere between 15 and 45 minutes. They had no idea how long that kid was in the car.
Nope. Tim, what else did you want to share tonight?
Yeah, well, that's why even with my dog, now if I go to a rest stop on a road trip, I'll just take her into the bathroom with me, or I'll try to do a curbside, whatever they call it, curbside pickup, if I've got her with me in the car, because somebody's going to call, and then I'm going to lose my dog, and that's the most important thing in my life. Only other thing I called about really was I was thinking about Poloniex. In the old days, you could register for a Poloniex account with a fake name. You could just upload your BTC.
Yep, this is a crypto exchange. Yep, crypto to crypto.
Yep, and they had margin trading accounts. You could not go negative on them, but you could lose everything, but you can margin trade, which was really exciting. You had a opportunity to make money there.
Did they get rid of that?
Yeah, they got rid of that, I think. And the other thing was you could lend to the margin traders, and that was virtually no risk.
Well, except for the risk that you put money on a crypto exchange. Hey, thanks for the call tonight, Tim. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. By the way, people outside of the United States still have access to a lot of these features he's talking about, the margin trading or the staking services and all that stuff. It's just the people in the U.S. that are going to get screwed. More coming up.
When commercials come on, don't push the button. Instead, listen. Even if you don't sell things for a living, you're still selling in the various conversations and transactions that make up your busy day. With money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important, especially if you're a job seeker. So take a lesson from Madison Avenue. Often the fewer words, the more effective the message. Like Jiffy Lube, where where you never need an appointment. Or the Office Max ad that says, you supply the ambition, we supply everything else. How about online ticket broker StubHub.com, the way in when it's sold out? Or CyberCupidMatch.com's seductive, go ahead, it's okay to look. How cleverly and succinctly can you distill your message? For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. Charges facing former US President Donald Trump have been released in relation to handling of classified documents at his private estate. The 37-count indictment was made public on Friday, a day after Trump was charged in the case in a federal court in Miami. Special counsel Jack Smith has encouraged a speedy trial and says Trump is innocent until proven guilty. Sally Patterson reports.
Donald Trump is charged with unauthorized possession of classified material, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and making false statements to law enforcement. The indictment says the former president hid documents which related to US nuclear weapons and military operations, material which could, quote, put at risk the national security of the United States. It also alleges Trump stored official documents in a ballroom, bedroom, and even a bathroom at his Mar-a-Lago club in Florida. Trump has called the indictment election interference at the highest level and argues he is innocent.
Skies are clearing across parts of the US East Coast after several days of hazardous air conditions. But many regions are still feeling the effects of Canada's wildfires. The National Weather Service Friday warned of moderate to unhealthy air quality for parts of the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley and Midwest. The agency says conditions should improve over the weekend. Texas is deploying barriers in the Rio Grande River in an effort to deter migrant crossings. Tony Waterman has more.
The first buoy string will stretch 1,000 feet, the massive red round balls measuring 4 feet in diameter. Officials say the buoys will be anchored to the riverbed with netting, preventing anyone from swimming underneath them. The first set will be deployed almost immediately in Eagle Pass, where officials have encountered an uptick in crossings. But Governor Greg Abbott says the ultimate goal is to install miles of the buoys in the Rio Grande. He has accused the Biden administration of not doing enough to prevent illegal crossings.
The French president has condemned the stabbing attack in southeast France that took place on Thursday, leaving 4 children needing intensive care. Ross Cullen has the latest.
Emmanuel Macron said that attacking children was the most barbaric act there is. He was speaking on Friday after visiting Annecy, where an attack took place on Thursday as a man stabbed adults and children in and around a playground in the southeast city in France. The French president also met members of the public who tried to intervene to stop the attack, saying that he was extremely proud of their efforts.
And former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is stepping down as a Member of Parliament, following the release of the Partygate report. The inquiry was examining whether he misled Parliament over whether Downing Street broke COVID lockdown rules. Johnson says the report is an attempt to drive him out. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSA.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. Phones are open. If you want to join the show, the number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here in the studio tonight, it's Ian
and Chris.
And coming up later this year, our very own co-host Mark Edge is going to be traveling to Prague once again for the Liberty in Our Lifetime conference. It is the best place to learn about the so-called Free Cities projects, which purport to be self-governing territories that uphold individual rights and freedoms. Now, whether that's true or not still remains to be seen because a lot of these free cities haven't gotten off the ground, but representatives from those projects will be present from the U.S., Honduras, Germany, and even Norway to share updates on their progress and explain why you should consider moving to or doing business in a free city. Mark spoke last year at the conference. He'll be speaking again this year, and if you want to attend, you can save 10% on your tickets by using code FTL. That's FTL like Free Talk Live. Just go to libertyinourlifetime.org. The event is October 14th and 15th in Prague. You can meet Mark and the rest of the Free Cities Project's people there. It should be an interesting event if that's something that you think would intrigue you. That's libertyinourlifetime.org. Code FTL saves you 10% for the event happening in Prague, October 14th and 15th. We are talking about a study done by Cato Institute looking at the CBDC, but it had an interesting question. And I want to look at the larger study here in a few moments and see what Americans are saying about their interest in the CBDC. But apparently, not quite 1 in 3 of younger Americans under the age of 30 support the idea of putting government monitoring devices, cameras specifically, into people's homes. Quote, the government installing surveillance cameras in every household in order to supposedly reduce domestic violence, abuse, and other illegal activity. 3 out of 10 people in the United States under the age of 30 support that. And so that's what sparked this larger conversation. Reason.com with an interesting piece here, interviewing a psychologist, Clay Routledge, from he's the director of the Human Flourishing Lab at the Archbridge Institute, suspects that the safetyism that we hear about so often in the last couple of decades, maybe even the last few decades, has been what has driven younger people to this obsession with being safe all the time. And, of course, we saw it on wide display in the COVID situation that happened a few years ago, where everyone seemed to be obsessed with safety. It wasn't actually everyone, but it felt like it, especially in the bigger cities. And you've got, parents, Gen X, maybe even boomer parents and Gen X parents who've been trying to protect their children from all kinds of experiences, negative experiences like scraping their knees when they're on their skateboard or bicycle or whatever. And just this constant overprotectionism is what he says may be leading people to demand more government in people's lives. And I think he might be right.
And it's scary to think this, in that people learn by doing and making mistakes. To protect your child is to undermine effectively education, their learning.
Absolutely. Making mistakes is the only way that you can actually learn.
Yeah.
I mean, if mistakes happen to other people, maybe you can pick that up, but you really don't get it until it happens to you.
Yeah. I mean, basically what it comes down to is we like to think that we learn, from other people, but most of the learning that we really do in life is from making our own mistakes.
Which is one of the reasons why it takes so long to bring people on board with understanding the ideas of liberty, because until the government has screwed you directly, it's just not the same. You just don't pay as much attention. So Routledge's concerns echoed those of Greg Lukianoff, the president of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, and social psychologist Jonathan Haidt in The Coddling of the American Mind, which is an article published by The Atlantic in 2015 and then later expanded into a book. They delved into the then relatively new phenomenon of intolerance on college campuses for the free exchange of ideas. The roots, as they suggested, lay in overprotective child rearing that encouraged anxiety and warped culture. Quote, stories of abducted children appeared more frequently on the news, and in 1984, images of them began showing up on milk cartons. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
In response, many parents pulled in the reins and worked harder to keep their children safe. The flight to safety also happened at school, they said. The result was a vindictive protectiveness that smothered dissent and prioritized safety over liberty. And what's the old saying? I don't know if it was, I think it's attributed to Jefferson, but it was somebody else. I don't know if it was Ben Franklin, but those who desire safety over liberty will get neither.
Yeah,
basically.
Something like that.
I'm sure I'm paraphrasing it somewhat.
It's pretty close, what you quoted.
Of course, they say at Reason, we can't be sure this is a growing preference rather than a blip. Oh, sorry, I missed this. A 21-year-old college graduate at the time, in 2015, would be 29 now, which is the upper age of the cohort with the highest support for Orwellian surveillance. we may be seeing preferences for security over freedom carried forward into discussions about privacy and surveillance. Though we can't be sure it's a growing preference rather than a blip or something younger survey respondents will grow out of. Nobody seems to have thought in the past to ask Americans if they considered George Orwell's dystopian 1984 a viable blueprint for the future, so the question will have to be repeated. But the data gives us something to consider.
Yikes.
Quote, we don't know how much of this preference for security over privacy or freedom is something unique to this generation or simply the result of youth. However, there is reason to think that part of this is generational. Americans over the age of 45 have vastly different attitudes on in-home surveillance cameras than those who are younger.
Well, I mean, they're installing youth the population in general as a whole seems to be installing these cameras themselves voluntarily. If
What do you
look
mean
at
by that?
the Amazon Ring, I think.
Oh,
we
right,
were talking about. I mean, this isn't even something that like the government is mandating and people are doing.
Just happening on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there may be something to the idea, though, that it's a younger person's problem and people may grow out of it, hopefully, that they're going to grow out of it. I mean, the old saying about younger people is they tend to be socialists, but then when they actually have life happen to them, they change their views. So maybe they're just too young to realize how evil the government is, and maybe they'll figure it out as time goes on. So that's the optimistic view of this. At least one expert studying the issue agrees the surveillance survey results reveal something real and unsettling. Routledge said, I do think this new finding from Cato is just one indicator of a very real trend of Americans, and especially younger generations of Americans, prioritizing security over freedom. And I think it's a bigger issue than many realize. And the reason why it's a big issue is because the government doesn't actually make you safe. Okay, they actually put you in danger, because if all of a sudden you've got a government security camera in your home watching everything you do in your living room or in other rooms, they may see you doing something that you didn't think was illegal, but it turns out it is illegal, and then they send in the goon squad to come kidnap you over it. Or maybe you are doing something that you did know is illegal. You're smoking marijuana in some of the states where that's not allowed. Federally, it's not allowed at this point. And so now you got federal FBI agents knocking at your door, right? So, like, just because you don't think you have something to hide doesn't mean that you don't actually have something to hide from these people.
And if you look at the statistics, the number of like no-knock raids, for example, has been going up and up and up.
Sure, it has.
And even though they've like, I think they've in theory put some restrictions in theory, like the courts have put some restrictions on these no-knock warrants. Or the number of them being issued or something to that effect, they're still doing the no-knock warrants, and then they're just, lying about it or, not or admitting that they didn't knock, but nothing happens as a consequence. So they just keep doing it. The Crypto 6 case, I thought they had a no-knock warrant. Turns out they didn't.
They had an announced
they just
warrant.
didn't knock.
Yeah. And yet that was still, totally accepted by the courts and all that. Didn't matter. The number, if you want to join the show here, 603-283-6160. You can, of course, bring up anything. So here's the actual study by the Cato Institute. And the study itself wasn't about necessarily cameras in homes. That was just one question that they asked. It was about the central bank digital currency idea, the CBDC, which, of course, as we've seen, multiple nation states around the world are implementing CBDCs. Some have actually implemented it, like Nigeria. It's a thing there.
Wasn't it a total failure? Or no,
it's
that was
still there.
Okay. I might be thinking of a different.
It's a failure in that no one is interested in it. So the people of Nigeria just don't care, and they're not adopting it voluntarily. So they may end up using some coercion later to force their adoption of it.
Probably wise on the population's part.
Indeed. So let's just say it's been a bit of a rocky road there in Nigeria for the CBDC. Now, Americans are a little more well kept, let's say. They, we're wealthier here in the United States. We're well fed. There's not rampant poverty here in the United States. At least not yet. Not yet.
You don't watch much news, do you?
No, there's not rampant poverty in the United States.
Well,
I mean, everybody's well fed here, dude. Look at all the fat people.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
You go to a trailer park and you're going to find a ton of fat people.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that at least the left wants you to believe that poverty is rampant in the United States.
Oh, sure. I mean, the U.S. definition of poverty right? Where they just pick an arbitrary number, an income number, and they say anyone that has less than that number is poverty in the United States. But those people are still making way more money than most of the rest of the world is.
Yeah.
And those people probably have more than one television in their home, more than one smartphone in their family. They probably have an air conditioner and a heater, and they are eating 3 meals a day. And they're probably eating some number of those meals out at like McDonald's, right? So they've got some money. They're just not spending it particularly effectively.
Wisely.
Right?
Yeah. I can just imagine people, paying for like their cable bill as opposed to like, feeding themselves. And then of course they're like, well, these people are starving. Well, they're starving because they're paying for their cable and not
They're still
paying
not
for
starving,
food.
dude. They'll go to the food bank. They'll get there's plenty of food. Look at all the fat poor people in America. I mean, that's a perfect example of how well-fed Americans are. There's a ton of food here, at least for now. Now, maybe things will change as they did in Venezuela when hyperinflation hits, where the people in Venezuela were eating 3 meals a day. And then in recent years, it went down
Not
to
so
2
much.
meals a day.
Yeah.
Right? And the meals aren't what they used to be. So
Well, by the time you get your paycheck, and this is, I think, what people don't understand is, in Venezuela, right, this is a socialist country.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you get your paycheck, the money isn't worth anything.
It's not worth as much as it was, that's for sure. So that could happen here. When it will happen here remains to be seen. So for right now, Americans are fat, and they're okay. I mean, they're starting to feel the pinch of inflation. That's starting to frustrate people. They're having to make buying decisions that they haven't made before. Americans are giving up on some of the name brands and going to the store brands, and they're cutting costs and getting smaller quantities of things. So people are adjusting to the inflation that is happening. But again, we're not skipping meals quite yet.
Not yet.
So according to the Cato survey here on CBDCs, they asked questions about, do you even know what this is, right? Like who... That's why whenever we use the term, I always spell it out. Central bank digital currency. The average person does not know what these things are, and that's what this survey found.
And even if you spell it out, do people know what the central bank digital currencies are?
No, of course not.
So we have to explain it.
Well, yeah. So a central bank currency is like the dollar or the euro or one of these things that are issued by a central bank. In our case, it's called the Federal Reserve. And the central bank, of course, is the reason why we have inflation, because they print out more money into existence, or they increment zeros and numbers in a computer system that makes more digital money. And the CBDC is essentially the idea of taking the dollar as we know it and taking it out of the hands of the banks. Now, this is one proposal. How this will end up being implemented remains to be seen, because the banks don't want to lose their control. But it would put accounts in the hands individual accounts in the hands of the Federal Reserve. So like right now, the Federal Reserve deals with big banks, they deal with bankers, they deal with governments, but you don't have an account at the Federal Reserve. This would essentially give you an account with the Federal Reserve through some sort of app on your phone, and give them total control over how you can spend your money.
So are you telling me that instead of having a Visa card, I'd have GovCard?
You probably wouldn't even have a card. I don't know how it would end up being implemented. They would probably want you to have some sort of phone.
But it would be something akin to that, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that gives the government more ability to monitor your transactions instantly, rather than having to apply for a warrant or call up the bank and ask them for it. So they would just have that right there at the Federal Reserve. Put restrictions on your ability to have certain transactions.
You drank one too many sodas this month.
Right. Yep. Or if you're on a welfare program, they would restrict where and when or whatever you could spend the welfare money, that kind of thing. So those are some of the things they could do. And, of course, they could cut you off entirely if they wanted to as well. They could freeze your account with one fell swoop. They could empty the account if they wanted to. Total control. So with that, here is the story from Cato.org. While regularly Americans use digital dollars via credit cards, debit cards, and other digital platforms, those dollars are a liability of a private commercial bank that issued them. CBDC would be a liability of the government's central bank or the Federal Reserve, and therefore it would create a direct link between citizens and the government's central bank. Twice as many Americans today oppose the Federal Reserve offering a central bank digital currency as Americans that favor it. So it's 34% of Americans who oppose the CBDC, and 16% who favor the CBDC. So we're talking about 50% total having even an opinion about this. 49% of Americans do not have an opinion about the CBDC, and that likely stems from the fact that only 28% of Americans are familiar with CBDCs, which I'm surprised it's even that high.
Yeah.
And 72% are completely unfamiliar with the CBDC. Yeah. 3 out of 10 roughly of 3 out of 4 Americans don't know what a CBDC is. I suspect nearly as many Americans don't even understand that the US dollar doesn't even have any backing on it. You know, the financial intelligence of the average American is very, very low.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've actually talked to people who don't understand or cannot comprehend that the dollar, by holding dollars, they lose value every single year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't teach that in school.
Nope. It's not prices going up, really. It's basically money being stolen from you through money printing, through inflation.
That's what inflation is. It's the
government doing that. It's not businesses doing that. The businesses are just reacting to the money printing that the government is doing.
But the government will lie to you and tell you that it's the evil corporate companies seeking profits. That's why, quote, inflation is happening. They'll tell you every lie they can possibly concoct to get you to think inflation is something other than them just printing more money into existence.
Yep. Yeah, and it's interesting because they do it through the inflation is a result of different things that the government does, but one of those examples besides the money printing is things like under Trump they introduced a tariff and 25% on goods from China. Well, that's about 13% overall at Walmart. When you go to buy stuff, it's increased the price by about 13%. So
right, and then throw inflation on top of that, and you got a real nasty situation.
Yep.
Now, when you break it down demographically, Republicans are more likely to oppose than Democrats. Strong majorities of both Democrats and Republicans are, of course, unfamiliar with CBDCs, but Republicans are slightly more familiar, with 34% of them being aware of them, and Democrats 25%, independents also 25%. But Democrats are almost twice as inclined, 22% of Democrats, to support adopting the CBDC than Republicans at 11%. Interestingly, a majority, that is 53% of Republicans, oppose the CBDC, while most Democrats don't have an opinion, and 22% of them are opposed. Now, I wonder if the Republicans would change their tune if it was a Republican president who was talking about implementing a CBDC.
I'd be surprised if the Republicans, I think what might be holding the Republicans back is they don't quite understand that they can control you more with a central bank digital currency.
Well, they don't want the Democrats to control them more, which is why they're more likely to be against it.
That's true,
right,
but that's why when they're in power, they probably would support it.
That's what I'm saying.
And the Democrats would be more in opposition.
Yeah, I suspect we're going to see a flippening on that if a Republican gets elected.
I suspect you're right.
To president. Let's see. What else do you need to know about this here? Men are apparently more likely than women to support the CBDC. Strangely, 22% of men versus 11% of women supporting a CBDC. Why do you think that is? I mean, that's a pretty significant difference.
I mean, women have been taught to hate technology and hate learning, I think. I think that's kind of been the historic
Yeah, but women are on their phones as much as or at least younger women are on their phones as much as younger men.
Yeah,
so.
but they're not looking at stocks and bonds. They're looking at pictures of
yeah, you don't know you're a gay man.
Yeah, right. Like, what do I know what women are looking at on their phones?
Yeah, I mean, some of them are looking at clothes, and that's certainly true. Apparently, black Americans are more than likely as white Americans. 32% black Americans, 13% of white Americans to support the CBDC, and are more likely than Hispanic Americans at 20% to support it. Young Americans, here we go, are about 10 times more supportive of a CBDC than seniors. Nearly a third of people under the age of 30, that's 32%, support the CBDC compared to 25% of 30 to 44-year-olds, 8% of 45 to 64-year-olds, and 3% of Americans over 65.
What was the percentage that understood what central bank digital currency was in the first place?
That would be...
Because that number was really low, wasn't it?
Yeah, 28%. So yeah,
people
1 out of 4.
So people are supporting things they don't even understand what it is that they're supporting.
Well, I think they're talking about the ones that support it. So when they're looking at the numbers of the people who support the CBDC, they're talking about the ones that
only the people
are
who
aware
understand
of
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think. Although they obviously did make the people in the survey aware of this issue, and so they started asking them questions about, like, letting them know what a CBDC could do. The fact that the CBDC could be used to control your purchases. The fact that the CBDC could be used to shut down your ability to make purchases. The things we were just discussing. And they started to see that people would be more likely to oppose the CBDC once they learn about the potential. So the survey investigated how Americans navigate potential costs and benefits associated with the United States adopting the CBDC. Overwhelming majorities would oppose the adoption of the CBDC if it meant the government could control what people spend their money on. 74% of Americans said, no, we don't want a CBDC if it can do what you're saying here, and that is restrict what you can buy.
You know what's going to happen is they're going to pass it, and then of course it can't be changed.
Oh, right.
So you might be objecting to it, but it's too late.
Yeah, they're going to shove it down your throat.
Yeah.
At that point. And not any of these people, I know Ron DeSantis, for instance, out of Florida, has been making a bunch of political hay opposing, quote unquote, the CBDC, and they passed some bill down in Florida that supposedly, what was the terminology? They didn't make it illegal, but they were acting like that they were somehow damaging, like prohibiting the CBDC, when in reality, according to Aaron Day, who is the Republican candidate out of New Hampshire, the Free Stater who's running for office, he said the bill actually, all it does is it just simply exempts the CBDC from the Uniform Commercial Code. So therefore, it means that the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code in Florida, doesn't protect people using the CBDC. That's all. It doesn't make it illegal. It doesn't mean that the CBDC is prohibited in the state of Florida. And they couldn't do that under the federal government anyway. They would have to secede from the United States if they want to get out from underneath the CBDC. So it's all politics.
And the politician clearly doesn't want that.
Of course not. He wants to be the president,
right?
Is what that guy wants. So don't believe him for a moment when he acts like he's opposed to the CBDC. It's just political. They're using it as a political football. So they say that 74% of Americans oppose the CBDC if it means government could control what people spend their money on. 68% of Americans oppose the CBDC if the government could monitor their spending. And 68% also oppose the CBDC if it would mean that the government would abolish cash. 65% say the CBDC that the CBDC could attract cyber attacks, so 65% would oppose it for that reason. 64% would oppose it.
Really?
If the government
cyber attacks?
If the government
attacks
could charge a tax on those who don't spend money during recessions. So basically, the more you tell people about the CBDC, the more likely they are to oppose the CBDC. So that's the good news from this particular survey. But of course, as you pointed out, Chris, it doesn't matter sometimes what the people want. Like we saw with the Bearcat here.
People are ignorant.
Here in New Hampshire. Well, even the people weren't ignorant of the Bearcat. They opposed it like 80 to 90%, but the city council went ahead and voted for it. They voted for a tank to have, the police have it.
Free Talk Live.
One of the counselor's excuses for her behavior after call accused her of engaging in stealing. This is stealing. You're taking something from somebody who believed they owned something, and by all evidence did own something. You're taking it from them. And as you say, Mark, this goes on all across the country. They're called tax sales or tax deeds. Whenever people drop back in not being able to pay property taxes, in this case, it's because of the down economy. These people are having a tough time. At one point, she got very frustrated, and she said, well, it's not stealing because it's the law. So apparently, when the law says you can take something that's not yours, it's not stealing. And now all the law is, as you pointed out, and you talk about the Constitution, that's supposed to be the highest law of the land. The law is just words on paper written down by men and women. Some of them signed their names to it, but most of us, in fact, 99.999% of us, never sign anything in regards to their laws.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. Charges facing former US President Donald Trump have been released in relation to handling of classified documents at his private estate. The 37-count indictment was made public on Friday, a day after Trump was charged in the case in a federal court in Miami. Special counsel Jack Smith has encouraged a speedy trial and says Trump is innocent until proven guilty. Sally Patterson reports.
Donald Trump is charged with unauthorized possession of classified material, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and making false statements to law enforcement. The indictment says the former president hid documents which related to US nuclear weapons and military operations, material which could, quote, put at risk the national security of the United States. It also alleges Trump stored official documents in a ballroom, bedroom, and even a bathroom at his Mar-a-Lago club in Florida. Trump has called the indictment election interference at the highest level and argues he is innocent.
Skies are clearing across parts of the US East Coast after several days of hazardous air conditions. But many regions are still feeling the effects of Canada's wildfires. The National Weather Service Friday warned of moderate to unhealthy air quality for parts of the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley and Midwest. The agency says conditions should improve over the weekend. Texas is deploying barriers in the Rio Grande River in an effort to deter migrant crossings. Tony Waterman has more.
The first buoy string will stretch 1,000 feet, the massive red round balls measuring 4 feet in diameter. Officials say the buoys will be anchored to the riverbed with netting, preventing anyone from swimming underneath them. The first set will be deployed almost immediately in Eagle Pass, where officials have encountered an uptick in crossings. But Governor Greg Abbott says the ultimate goal is to install miles of the buoys in the Rio Grande. He has accused the Biden administration of not doing enough to prevent illegal crossings.
The French president has condemned the stabbing attack in southeast France that took place on Thursday, leaving 4 children needing intensive care. Ross Cullen has the latest.
Emmanuel Macron said that attacking children was the most barbaric act there is. He was speaking on Friday after visiting Annecy, where an attack took place on Thursday as a man stabbed adults and children in and around a playground in the southeast city in France. The French president also met members of the public who tried to intervene to stop the attack, saying that he was extremely proud of their efforts.
And former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is stepping down as a Member of Parliament, following the release of the Partygate report. The inquiry was examining whether he misled Parliament over whether Downing Street broke COVID lockdown rules. Johnson says the report is an attempt to drive him out. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the agonies of a Republican politician seeking to challenge Donald Trump for the party's presidential nomination, despite a long track record of slavishly backing him. Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, was one of several Republicans announcing presidential campaigns this week. Back in 2016, as governor, he was one of the first prominent Republican-elected lawmakers to back Trump in his quest for the presidency. Now, he says, he got it wrong.
What I was hoping to do by endorsing him early, recognizing that he had won in New Hampshire, he had won in South Carolina, and almost won in Iowa. He was the nominee. And I thought as a longtime friend, I could make him a better candidate and a better president. I was wrong.
He certainly changed his tune. Here was Chris Christie on the stump this week.
He is, for those of you who read the Harry Potter books, like Voldemort, who never admits a fault and who always finds someone else and something else to blame for whatever goes wrong. And there's this thing like, Christie doesn't really care about winning. All he cares about doing is destroying Trump. Now let me ask you something. How are those two things mutually exclusive? I am going out there to take out Donald Trump, but here's why. I want to win.
He has a long road ahead of him, garnering just 1% of support among Republican voters at the beginning of a 2024 primary process in which Donald Trump is still the runaway leader. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
FSN is an independent source of news for TV, radio and digital networks worldwide. You can find more of our minute-by-minute updates on Twitter. Follow us there at Feature Story. And we have a wealth of audio and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denzelo reporting.
In an unsettling video released over the web this week, Buddhist extremist cell Kamathana vowed to unleash a massive wave of serenity and nirvana all across the West. Members of the group threatened to implement such severe measures as tranquil chanting, meditation sessions, and eye-opening koans, and assured U.S. leaders of the group's absolute commitment to engulfing Americans in complete and unyielding enlightenment. Here now is a clip from the video.
We will not cease until every city, from New York to London, succumbs to a state of spiritual harmony. Prepare yourself.
Sources confirm that the Pentagon responded to the film by ordering immediate tactical bombings throughout Tibet. And in tech news, the inventor of the Gromdar says he's determined to put a Gromdar in every American home. In other news, a woman who had almost formed a healthy sense of self joined social media, and an area man can remember exactly where he was and what he was doing when he assassinated John F. Kennedy.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. It is Free Talk Live. Phones are open here if you want to join the show. The number is 603-283-6160 as we kick off the third hour of the program here tonight. It's Ian and Chris. We are discussing a survey or study done by the Cato Institute looking at Americans and their opinions, if they have any at all, about the so-called central bank digital currency, or the CBDC. And this is something that is sort of out there, potentially on the horizon somewhere, as the federal government thugs are considering adopting the CBDC technology. They're looking over at other countries like China or Nigeria, where they are either in the process of adopting or have adopted the CBDC. I think there's something like 7 countries where it's either available, it's happening, or it's like coming soon. The gears are turning towards releasing the CBDC, which would, of course, give government total economic control over the people of those countries. And, you expect that from China, for instance. And the United States, of course, would love to have that ability as well. Now, here they're going to have to be a little more careful about it. They're not going to just be able to, they're not going to just roll out the CBDC and then pull cash. Cash isn't just going to disappear right away.
Ooh.
They're not going to. That would cause an uproar.
You're probably right, but they have already withdrawn larger denominated bills.
That was years ago, but yes, they did do that. What was that? I don't know, 40 years or more? I mean, I don't remember ever seeing large denomination bills.
Me either.
As a
I don't
kid.
necessarily know they existed in my lifetime even.
Yeah.
But they did exist. And
they did. $500 and $1,000 bills used to be a thing. And, of course, they used drug dealing as the excuse to get rid of those.
That's where it starts. Yeah. But now you can't even do a transaction that's over $600 without it being reported to the government.
Yep, that's a recent change. So they talked to people in this survey asking them their opinions about the CBDC, again, central bank digital currency, and not surprisingly, most Americans didn't know anything about it. They'd never heard about it. It was roughly 3/4 of Americans that said they didn't know anything about the CBDC, 72% to be exact, and only 28% of Americans were familiar with the CBDC. And how familiar they are, I don't think we got into that detail. But then they did explain to the people on the survey, what the CBDC is, what are the things that could be done with the CBDC. And by the way, Democrats are more likely to accept the idea of the CBDC just by default without learning anything about it. However, when informed of the fact that a CBDC could allow the government to control what they spend their money on and when, 74% of Americans then decided they don't like the idea of the CBDC. And in fact, both Democrats and Republicans don't like that idea. 71% of Democrats and 82% of Republicans would oppose the CBDC if the government could control what people spend their money on. So that's, again, a little bit of good news here, although, Chris, you're skeptical that it's going to matter when it comes down to it, right? Because the government's, if the government just says they want to do a CBDC, well, what are the people going to do about it?
Yep.
I mean, you could try to refuse to adopt the CBDC. I mean, that would be a potential thing that you can do initially.
Discontinued cash, like they did in India.
Well, have they? I don't think they've discontinued cash.
I think bills over like $1 have been discontinued.
Right. So that's the question: is what are the tactics that they're going to use to disincentivize the use of cash? And that's one of them.
When you need a wheelbarrow,
right,
to buy lunch, you're probably not going to use cash anymore.
Well, that's a good point, right? So we know inflation's happening.
Yep.
And so we've seen what happened in Venezuela, for instance, with hyperinflation, where it literally did get to the point, and it is to the point, where the cash is so valueless that they're actually using it to make things out of. You could go into the streets in Venezuela, and from a street vendor, you could buy a purse or a wallet literally made from the Venezuelan bolivar, in which you could then put things, right? You got a purse made out of bolivar. They were weaving.
And it's worth more than the dollars it was made from.
Yeah, because somebody took the time to make the
right.
thing. But it's weaved baskets, weaved handcrafted goods were being made from the Venezuelan bolivar. So it's just good. It was so worthless that, yes, you would need stacks and stacks of it to simply go out to eat at a restaurant. And, of course, as you pointed out, it was to the point where if you went into a bar and you bought one beer and then you drank that beer and then you bought a second beer, the second beer would cost more than the first beer because the price had gone up.
The thing with the whole outlawing cash thing, it's that what they'll probably do, if I had to speculate here, is they know inflation's happening, right?
Right.
So they probably will simply ban $100. They'll get rid of $100 bills or $50 bills, and then in a couple of years from now, it's going to take 50 bills in order to buy lunch, and at some point, it's going to be unmanageable.
Well, it already costs $40 or $50 to buy lunch.
It does, but we do have $20 bills, and we do have $50 and $100 bills.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about that. I think they're going to get rid of the higher denomination bills. That's an easy thing for them to do, and they'll use the excuse of drug dealers,
excuse.
Right? And then people say, "Oh, okay, well, you got to do it," and then they'll take them some time, right? Because it takes them time to suck the old bills out of circulation. So it's like whenever somebody goes into a bank, they turn in 50s and 100s, and they don't come back out.
There's some other things they'll do too, and they've already started actually. They now charge a fee, a percentage, if a business goes to deposit cash.
That's
so
right.
They're discouraging businesses from depositing cash.
Yeah, great point. So I think you're going to see more of that, and you'll also see disincentivization in other ways. So, for instance, if you are going to get a government payment, maybe there's going to be some sort of UBI, the income tax refunds, welfare checks, some sort of government payment. They're going to make that a mandate. Like if you want the money from the government, then you're going to have the government app.
Certainly if you want it fast.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe they'll still give people the opportunity to get it in a different way, but they don't have to.
And then eventually they'll discontinue the
other option
method.
Yeah. So that's another thing they're going to do. They're going to incentivize people to get out of the dollar.
Interestingly enough, I've already seen this happen. If you look at businesses and filing paperwork with the government, there are certain things that you cannot do as a business, or you cannot do as a business if you have more than, X employees or X dollars in revenue. You have to file electronically.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you don't have a computer, then you got to hire an accountant that does, right?
Yeah. Yep.
We're going to go to your phone calls here. Your thoughts are certainly welcome, but this is something that they are absolutely considering doing, the CBDC, and I think it's probably going to be coming whether people like it or not. And that, of course, leads to the question of what can you do about this? Well,
I know the answer to that. Goldbacks.
Cryptocurrency, goldbacks, these are going to be some alternative options that are going to be very difficult for them to stop people from using. They're trying to stop cryptocurrency, and hopefully they will fail in their mission. But we can talk more about that coming up here. Let's talk to Sarah first. She's in New Mexico. Go ahead, Sarah. Sarah in New Mexico going once. Sarah in New Mexico going twice. All right. Let's try this caller. We've got David Butt on the line in New Mexico. Go ahead, Mr. Butt.
What'd you call me, dude?
Mr. Butt.
You called me David Butt.
Yes.
How do you get from major pain in the butt to David Butt?
Would you prefer
What
just
kind of
Mr.
logic
Butt?
are you-
Would that be preferable to you?
How do you? Well, I thought my rank and title was major. How do you get Mr. out of major?
No, you got to earn major.
No. The original Major Payne certainly hasn't earned major.
I think he
How come I
has.
have to earn it?
I think he has.
I'm just kidding, Major. Don't get all worked up. So anyway, so I can start calling Mr. James Baker then, huh?
Who?
James Baker.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Aria DiMezzo, a.k.a.
Oh, you're dead naming. You're dead naming.
Well,
Aria.
you're dead naming me, dude.
Yeah.
So Major Payne in the butt. Okay, so moving on.
Show me your driver's license with that on it.
Is it on James? Is Aria DiMezzo on James Baker's driver's license?
Aria DiMezzo is on Aria DiMezzo's driver's license.
Oh, but not on. Okay, so not on James Baker's anymore. Okay. Anyway, so the things you're talking about could all be solved, and I think they will at some point, because people are starting to catch on by stating the fact that the government that you have is illegal. They're not legitimate, and they're afraid you're going to find out. So you're talking about inflation. Government has no legal right to control what tools you use to transfer wealth. All money is, all currency is a tool, like a hammer, to do a job. And that's so instead of having to tote around a whole cartload of cabbages to trade for, whatever you want to trade for, you use something fungible, like your cryptocurrency, your gold backs, or your U.S. dollar, and government has no legal authority to tell you, huh?
I think from a moral perspective, I would 100% agree with you. I think from a practical perspective, they've already said that they do. The feds have gone after so many people for developing the tools, for making them available, and for even just using the tools.
Right. What does a gang do? They intimidate, and they bully, and they damage, and they injure, and they kill. That's what a gang does. The U.S. government is, like I said, they're not legal. They're organized crime.
That's right.
And they've gotten away with it, going back 100, 150, 200 years and they just implement step after step after step. And each time they put something in, like, an income tax or a Federal Reserve, all they got to do is shut people up for a generation until the punks come along, like the ones you talk about, Gen Z or whatever you're talking about, that think that it's always been that way and it's legal, and they just wait for the old farts to die and so they're shut up. And then now we got the internet, so we can get rid of we can change what it says in books, at least the digital ones.
Right, the Ministry of Truth.
And how many people are holding 50 or 100 or 150-year-old books in their house to read and see what was fact and truth 100 years ago? How many people have a 100-year-old book in their house?
Not
Very
as many
few.
as used to.
Yeah, and let me add also that a lot of that, I'm no expert on anything, well, maybe one or two things, but not on this stuff. But I do hear people who would be taken as experts on media in recent years saying things that I've said, 5 or 10 years ago. And one fun one that I like a lot, because it's my viewpoint, is I heard a guy he actually was a 30-year law enforcement dude, and he says that we are now at the point where the only solution to this mess is one or two, either and this is authorized by the U.S. Constitution, either a military tribunal takes out the illegal government and restores, or
as though the military itself isn't, a violent group of government people.
He covered that. And he on that subject, what he said is that the general officers, the generals, are all political, and
That's
they
correct.
won't do it. But the junior officers that are below the rank of general, who watch their friends die for nothing all over the world, they will take out this government. And the military tribunal
Don't hold your breath.
is not run by generals. Yeah. It's run by the junior officers.
Yeah, don't hold your breath.
And
what was the second option?
The second option is we have a revolution, and I think, and I'm going to correct him on that, because technically it would not be a revolution, because a revolution would be overthrowing a legitimate government. This is not a legitimate government. This would be the legitimate government trying to push out organized crime.
Yeah, there's another option, which is peaceful secession. So, I mean, I understand why people like to tout revolution, but the reality is it's a violent
I gotta come back. I gotta come back for that one too. It's secede. So one state at a time, or however many times secede, and get out of the house that is the United States.
Right.
And my attitude is, this is my house. You get out, especially since you're illegal, government.
Yeah, well, I wish you the best of luck with that approach.
I don't know about the illegal or not. I think that's a terrible argument to make, because what's legal is whatever the government says it is.
Well, yeah, they don't think they're illegal.
It's immoral.
No,
it's a moral issue here, guys.
That's not how it works.
I think you're living in a fantasy.
Tell it to the judge.
Yeah, fantasy land here. If you think otherwise, I think the best thing we have going for us is that the moral thing is what they're doing is wrong, and that's why it should go away. Not because it's illegal.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Well, I would argue that they're one and the same.
All right, thank you for the call tonight. The number here is 603-283-6160. The reality is, if you're going to try a revolution, okay, that always comes with violence, right? Like, there's not really a peaceful way to do what he was hinting at there, right? He literally was talking about overthrowing the government, okay? That means you have to use violence, and they are ready for you, okay? Yeah. They are prepared for this. They have their guns, they have their troops, they have their FBI agents, they have their agents infiltrating your groups as we speak.
There's not enough people willing to do that. They have to fabricate them. They have to create people in order to have enough employment in order to sustain their employment.
There's a good chance if there was a, quote, revolution attempt in the United States that it would be mostly federal agents that were doing it. Kind of like the January 6th thing, which wasn't a revolution. It was just some people touring the Capitol without permission. But as it turns out, it looks like the federal agents were involved in setting that up, too. So they set the thing up, and then they take down as many of the participants as they possibly can.
There's actual video of them letting people in, letting the crowds in.
Yeah.
I don't even know how anybody could believe that the courts are not entirely they're just a joke as far as dealing some sort of sense, I guess some sort of justice, I guess is the choice word. They don't provide justice. It's one big joke.
And then you got remember the story of the Michigan governor who they were gonna kidnap her or whatever during COVID. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
You know who was involved with that, right?
Oh yeah,
the FBI.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, people might be thinking I'm a January 6th supporter. I'm not. I didn't vote for Trump. I would never vote for Trump.
Right.
But I'm not coming at it from a Democrat or Republican perspective, because I'm a libertarian. So it's I I can see what's happening.
Yeah, and that's the other problem with a revolution. Even if you could pull it off, which you're not. I mean, they got all kinds of
It's terrible.
guns.
It's a terrible strategy.
Yeah. Even if you could pull it off, well, then you're just talking about replacing the existing thugs with a new set of thugs. The people that are going to be leading that particular revolution are the ones who are going to be seeking power when it's all said and done. And they're not going to be liberty-loving people, right? Most liberty people just want to be left alone.
I think this is an interesting point you're sort of getting into here about why I think independence in New Hampshire. Like, I don't think just independence in and of itself is going to have any positive impact pretty much anywhere in the world, except if you combine it with a migration.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
You have to have both parts.
Mm-hmm. In this case, it's a migration of liberty-minded people, libertarians, voluntarists, liberty-loving anarchists coming to New Hampshire, who could then foment not a revolution, but a secession, a peaceful secession, a declaration of independence from the United States saying, all right, we tried this, we're out. Okay, we're just going our own separate way. We're going to be over here doing our thing in New Hampshire. We're going to be free. We're going to we're freer than any other place on the planet. We still have a terrible state government that we have to deal with, but it's not as bad as the rest of the state governments. New Hampshire is currently the #1 most free state, according to the Cato Institute Freedom of the 50 States study. And we will be more free without the federal government on our backs. Instantly, we'll be more free.
Yep.
Without that.
I think there's some of the fears that people have with independence, especially people when we're talking
fear
about
of the unknowns, the #1
unknowns for sure. But I think people don't understand what an independent states could look like, right? Like we have this idea that if New Hampshire became independent, that there would be border guards and you have to have a passport in order to cross between New Hampshire and Massachusetts or, Maine or whatever. And that's not necessarily the case. There's lots of countries that do not have border guards or passport checks when traveling between countries. This is something that, in fact, this is actually something that's a modern invention. I believe World War I or World War II.
World War II, I think, is when the passport came around.
Right. So, this idea that
that's less than 100 years ago.
Right. This isn't a modern invention. It doesn't have to be that way. Nothing says that, there has to be border checks, for trade. These are all things that have been, implemented, but it doesn't have to be that way. And there's a lot of examples out there where it's not that way.
I think that I agree with you, and I hope that that's the direction things go. I think that's going to be a major, major issue. It's going to be a very difficult thing, right? Because secession isn't necessarily something that is supported by just libertarians. While in a recent study that was done, which you can go to nhexit.us, in fact, I don't think we've even really talked about the study.
We haven't talked about the study?
I don't think so.
On Free Talk Live, really?
No, I don't think we have. I mentioned it, but I don't think I got into the details. But in this recent study that was done by the Survey, not Survey USA, was last year. Then we changed the study group to the UNH, the University of New Hampshire. One of the things that they were looking at here is... Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought of the thing that I was going to pull up from the study. They were looking at various different things. They're looking at 4 questions about independence. And one question was, if New Hampshire were not already part of the United States, would you want New Hampshire to join? Another was, would you support or oppose New Hampshire peacefully seceding from the United States and governing itself as a separate country? And would you support or oppose the idea of New Hampshire holding a vote to find out whether voters want New Hampshire to peacefully declare independence from the United States? So there was some pretty important questions that were being asked in this particular survey, and maybe we should talk about it a little bit more coming up here, and maybe I'll remember the thing that I wanted to point out specifically about this. But if you want to join the show, you can here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. So, I remember where I was going. People who support independence don't necessarily support freedom. And that's an important issue. We can flesh that out coming up here
in a moment, and you can join the show as well here on Free Talk Live.
Hi, I'm Derek J. To me, an activist's calling is to actively work to advance a cause. The cause for which I work is personal freedom. I believe my life is best when I engage in voluntary interactions and self-government. I reject the idea that anyone else has a higher claim to my life or my body than I do. I see people who call themselves the government as a threat to my personal freedom. I realize you may feel differently, but my relationship with the people who call themselves the government is completely involuntary. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. Charges facing former US President Donald Trump have been released in relation to handling of classified documents at his private estate. The 37-count indictment was made public on Friday, a day after Trump was charged in the case in a federal court in Miami. Special counsel Jack Smith has encouraged a speedy trial and says Trump is innocent until proven guilty. Sally Patterson reports.
Donald Trump is charged with unauthorized possession of classified material, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and making false statements to law enforcement. The indictment says the former president hid documents which related to US nuclear weapons and military operations, material which could, quote, put at risk the national security of the United States. It also alleges Trump stored official documents in a ballroom, bedroom, and even a bathroom at his Mar-a-Lago club in Florida. Trump has called the indictment election interference at the highest level and argues he is innocent.
Skies are clearing across parts of the US East Coast after several days of hazardous air conditions, but many regions are still feeling the effects of Canada's wildfires. The National Weather Service Friday warned of moderate to unhealthy air quality for parts of the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley and Midwest. The agency says conditions should improve over the weekend. Texas is deploying barriers in the Rio Grande River in an effort to deter migrant crossings. Tony Waterman has more.
The first buoy string will stretch 1,000 feet, the massive red round balls measuring 4 feet in diameter. Officials say the buoys will be anchored to the riverbed with netting, preventing anyone from swimming underneath them. The first set will be deployed almost immediately in Eagle Pass, where officials have encountered an uptick in crossings. But Governor Greg Abbott says the ultimate goal is to install miles of the buoys in the Rio Grande. He has accused the Biden administration of not doing enough to prevent illegal crossings.
The French president has condemned the stabbing attack in southeast France that took place on Thursday, leaving 4 children needing intensive care. Ross Cullen has the latest.
Emmanuel Macron said that attacking children was the most barbaric act there is. He was speaking on Friday after visiting Annecy, where an attack took place on Thursday as a man stabbed adults and children in and around a playground in the southeast city in France. The French president also met members of the public who tried to intervene to stop the attack, saying that he was extremely proud of their efforts.
And former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is stepping down as a Member of Parliament, following the release of the Partygate report. The inquiry was examining whether he misled Parliament over whether Downing Street broke COVID lockdown rules. Johnson says the report is an attempt to drive him out. From bureaus worldwide, this is FS.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live. We got time for you. If you join us now, the number is 603-283-6160. Get your call in here. Talk about anything that's on your mind. Again, the number is 603-283-6160. And joining you in the studio tonight, it's Ian
and Chris.
Make sure you check Chris out on his show. It's called Freedom Decrypted. He does it once a week from his studio at the Think Penguin studios over at thinkpenguin.com. You can get some Linux-based
Computer products, you guys just got some fresh laptops in, as I understand.
Yeah, it's been a while, but we
Are those
finally,
available for sale right now?
Yes, they are now on the website.
Very exciting.
And
you've been working hard on this.
Oh yeah, have we ever? It took like 6 months for us to finally come out with a laptop that is not garbage, because the industry has gone in a direction that is oh man, like they moved antennas from the screen to under the laptop for the Wi-Fi, which interferes with the reception.
Yeah, big time.
And this is like just industry standard now. So
doesn't make any sense.
In order to like deviate from like the direction the rest of the industry is going, we have to have like all sorts of special different changes to like
you had to do your own custom
design,
everything.
yeah,
right?
like more customization than we normally would have had to have done, and so we basically have the only laptops that aren't garbage.
That's amazing. So if
we only have one at the moment, but one model, different configurations, but one model.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So if you care about quality, you got to get over to thinkpenguin.com, check out the new laptop they got in there. And you're doing your own show. It's called Freedom Decrypted. It's every Saturday. It happens live at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. But if you can't watch live, you can also listen later or watch it later. Podcast, video downloads, all available, freedomdecrypted.com. It's for people that are into technology and freedom.
Yes.
Right? All right, let's go to Skeeter. We can talk more about the Independence survey here in a moment. But Skeeter is on the line calling us. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, I just wanted to say that I think your strategy for secession and the libertarian movement in general is doomed to failure.
Oh, okay.
No
Why is
one
that?
believes. No one believes that aggression is inherently evil, or that the non-aggression principle.
Well, there
is
are
wrong.
people who
So
believe
you'll-
that. Those are libertarians.
Yeah.
So it's not true that no
I'm sorry,
one
yeah.
believes that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean no one, but the majority of people, majority of rational people.
You're right about that. You're right.
I don't know about
they're not rational, but the majority of people are definitely okay with aggression, and that's why we have a migration happening of freedom-minded people who are coming here to New Hampshire. And whether you're aware of it or not, Skeeter, the libertarians here are an actual force to be reckoned with on the political scene. We've got we've got libertarians elected to state representative seats. We got the first Free Stater New Hampshire senator last year, and they know that we're here, and they are very concerned.
I don't get that strategy either.
Huh?
That strategy doesn't make sense. You guys often preach that democracy doesn't work, right? So why are you trying to fix it through the democracy system?
I don't know what you mean.
That's the system we have. We don't have a choice or control over what the system is.
Democracy may be immoral, but it is the system we're forced into.
Right.
So yeah, we're willing to work within the
So
system.
you're trying to make the system work, right?
Well, the system sucks.
No,
I mean,
the system doesn't work, but that's why we have a migration, so that we can sort of undermine it in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is the system is there. People believe in it, so we're going to use the system. I mean, there are some anarchists who refuse to vote and don't participate in the system at all, but a lot of us believe that whatever it takes to achieve more liberty in our lifetime, we're going to do it. So maybe you've confused us with some, anarchist types that don't vote. That's not who we are.
No, I just I'm pretty sure you guys think democracy doesn't work, right?
I think you just said that a moment ago, and
it doesn't
I think
work well. Just because it's the best system, out there doesn't mean it works well.
Democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding on dinner. It's an immoral system, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't function. I mean, obviously,
so you're just saying you need the right people in place for democracy to work, right?
No, I think most of us would be against the idea of democracy. I think we want to abolish the state entirely. But in order to end the state's control over people's lives, you have to do a couple of things. One, you have to change people's minds about the need for the state. And two, you have to somehow end the state in its current form.
I mean, the assumption is that you need the state to exist or to function as a society, and that's not necessarily the case. There's lots of examples of solutions that could, and in some cases, have replaced the state systems. So there was insurance, before governments got into the business of medicine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have Canada and you have a lot of Europe that has a single system that's garbage, but they have it, right? So it's not like in the United States doesn't have that system exactly, but we still have a kind of a messed up system. But It doesn't have to be where a system where the government has total and utter control. There are other solutions to problems. Cryptocurrency is another example. The government doesn't have to issue crypto or have to issue a currency. You can have a cryptocurrency. You can also have other currencies that are minted that are not done by government. There's the gold back as an example. There were coins, silver and gold coins, before governments got into minting coins, I do believe anyway. So it's not like the system has to be orchestrated by a monopoly on violence.
Yeah, but small point aside, I mean, I don't think insurance is a stable system, just like fractional reserve currency. But
you're
anyway,
saying you think fractional reserve is stable or is as unstable as insurance?
Yes, but the same. Yeah, I think they're inherently unstable, both systems.
Okay, well, the good news is you don't have to buy insurance in a place where government's not forcing you to.
Yeah, we don't even have mandatory car insurance in New Hampshire.
I actually may agree with you that insurance isn't necessarily the best system out
no,
there,
definitely not.
Yeah, I just wanted to address that little point. But my bigger point is that your movement's doomed to fail because
it's already succeeded.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you say it's doomed to fail, what would prove to you that it had succeeded? What things happening? What criteria do you have to decide whether it has failed or succeeded?
Because the non-aggression principle is not inherently moral.
That did not answer my question. I'm asking you for specific things that you could look at. What kind of results would you need to see, or the lack thereof those results, to prove one way or the other?
It's very funny for an anarchist to ask for me to point out examples about the system not working or working.
That's not what I asked you for either. I asked you for criteria. You said this movement will be a failure.
An example, not criteria.
No, I'm asking you for a criteria. You said the movement would fail, and I said, what criteria do you have that you would determine whether it has failed or it has succeeded?
I don't understand. You're asking for an example or you're asking for a reason inherently why it
Give me an example of what
in order to know something has succeeded, you have to be able to measure it, right? So the criteria in this case could be, for instance, hold on, Skeeter. You asked for this, so I'm going to explain it better to you. The criteria could be, for instance, that people are getting elected who are libertarians. Would that be an example of success, or would that be an example of failure?
I didn't hear you. I didn't hear the
there are
first
people who are getting elected in New Hampshire who are libertarians. Would that be an example of success, or would that be evidence of failure?
I don't think either of your movement. I don't think either.
Well, then you're just a moron. I don't know what else to tell you.
Let me just establish that I'm also an anarchist, right?
Could have fooled me.
Market anarchist. What's that?
You could have fooled me.
Well, okay, so just let me establish that so you guys know where I'm coming from. You don't wrongly think that, I'm just a normal guy who believes in democracy, right? I'm a type of free market, I'm a type of market anarchist that doesn't believe in the democracy. I think it's one of the most dangerous things out there. Also,
and you also don't believe that your viewpoint will ever take hold and that it could ever do anything meaningful.
I'm sorry, when you're interrupting me when I couldn't hear the first part when you're interrupting me.
I'm just trying to clarify what you're saying here. You're saying you support market anarchy, but you also don't believe that it could ever succeed.
No, I don't think your type of anarchy with the foundation of the non-aggression principle can succeed. It's totally statist in its roots.
Okay, so how are you? How are you going to achieve market anarchy?
He seemed to not even understand or know the terminology that he was using.
Yeah, what's your plan, dude? If our plan is so terrible, what's yours?
Say that again.
If our plan is so terrible, what is your plan, sir?
Is to work within the system to destroy it, work with its weaknesses and accentuate it.
I thought you just told us that working within the system is corrupt and not going to succeed.
I'm being interrupted like every time. Like I can't listen.
Well, you make a statement, and then I have a question about it. Okay, so you're saying
you can't even make me let me finish.
Go ahead.
Pause because I now I lost my train of thought. Okay, just ask a question. Right?
Well, you were trying to explain how you working within the system is somehow principled and good compared to us working within the system to try to achieve liberty.
Yeah. So let me just say, I don't think the government or democracy in particular, it doesn't work because it's inefficient, and that's other than immoral about it being like the monopoly on aggression or whatever you guys falsely accuse it of. Falsely think that its weaknesses.
How is that different than
you attack? In other words, you attack government on the basis of immorality. I talk it purely rationally, from an economic point of view, that it's inefficient, right? When in democracy you have like or republic, you have a pool of money where people are voting on how to spend it, and you have the tragedy of the commons and so on and so forth that makes it inefficient on how it spends the money, right? You guys just say, oh, all aggression is immoral, and no one believes this, and this is why your movement is doomed to fail, and none of you guys can rationally argue for it because it doesn't make sense. Like all aggression, that is silly. That's why you'll never convince even a large portion of the population that your movement is correct. You'll only get a commune of hippies, and that's what you're having now, right? You're not getting rational thinking people that establish a good rational foundation.
Okay, so you don't care about morality, and you're of the viewpoint.
I do.
I
do. I just don't think no aggression is a moral system.
You're of the viewpoint that other people don't care enough about morality, and so they're going to reject the idea that
you're confusing your system with morality. My morality is efficiency. Okay.
Well, that's just utilitarianism, sir. That's not morality.
I'm a type of utilitarian.
Yeah. So you want us to you were saying we won't possibly succeed to get people to change the system from the inside, but that you will. How are you going to do that?
Well, no. First off, you guys say all aggression is immoral.
What is your plan, sir? I understand that you're here trying to attack what we're doing. I'm asking you for your plan.
You want my alternative strategy, right? So I work within the system. I use the aggression. I use their inefficiency against them. So
How?
I vote for. You can wait for me to respond fully, and then
you just keep on rambling though. So I have to stop you at some point to ask another question.
Before I even get to it.
How are you going to use the system against itself?
Again, so in short, I vote for them to spend the most and vote for so through their fiscal irresponsibility. So I vote for measures that decrease the revenue, and I vote for the most spending. So I vote for things like the drug war, which I know find inherently wrong or immoral, and I know you're fighting with and I thank you for it. You're fighting my cause for me. You suffer. You pay the cost, and hopefully I can reap the freedom when the government collapses through fiscal collapse.
Okay, so you're an accelerationist then. You're somebody who believes that you should actually make the government larger faster.
Borrow more money.
So therefore it will fall upon itself.
Yeah, so
correct?
So you want to borrow more money. You want the government to borrow more money rather than increasing taxes.
Yes. I want them to borrow more money from people who lend it to them, hopefully, so that those people who lend the money suffer the most when they can't pay it back, hopefully in the near future.
And where are you calling from tonight, Skeeter?
California.
Good luck, bro. Thanks for the call. All right. We continue with Mikey calling from Manchester, New Hampshire. Go ahead, Mikey.
I'm actually closer to Concord, but I just received an email that my ticket has been refunded by the Free State Project for PorcFest.
Oof. All right. So this is a follow-up on the discussion we had previously where you had called in when we were interviewing the PorcFest organizer, Dennis Pratt, who claimed he banned you because he believed, without any real evidence, apparently, that you were messing with one of the online conferences that they were having. He had somebody who was causing an issue in a Jitsi conference, and they managed to get control of the conference room, kicked that person out who was anonymous, and then he alleges that you then joined the conference, and then he figured that previous person must have been you for some reason, and that was his alleged reason for kicking you out.
Yeah, so that's a kind of unusual line of logic to think that I would have come in anonymously and then come in as my own. So
Right.
it clearly would have been different people. But there's also another few updates related to that prior to this discovery, which I literally just discovered and managed to call in just in time. But Tuesday night, I went to the New Movers Party in Manchester, and I reached out to him, and we shook hands and talked briefly and had a friendly conversation. And then Carla Garrick was there also next to him. And then later in the night, I approached him. He was around with his dog and like in the middle of the room and not talking to anyone. And I said, hey, I did not do what you think I did. Again, I'm denying it.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically immediately laid into me about all kinds of things and called me a number of curses that I obviously can't say on air, and then stormed off.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
unfortunate.
I think yesterday or today he started messaging me on Telegram asking me to call him.
Mm-hmm.
I was busy at the time, so I didn't have a chance to really reply or deal with that. And I was, not really happy with the interaction the other day, so I didn't really see much reason to, respond to him right away.
Okay.
And he messaged me 4 times like, an insistent ex who, wants to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I honestly did not get a chance to respond because I have a busy life.
Right.
So, and then I came home today from work and just saw a few hours ago that my ticket was refunded.
Okay, now that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be disallowed from the campground, correct?
As far as I know, I have not received anything from the campground.
I mean, presumably you reserved a campsite, a year ago or whenever it was you reserved it, and that is still a campsite that is in your name. There's, to my knowledge, not any kind of security that is checking people's IDs or whatever when they come into PorcFest. There used to be years ago, and that was when the event was in a real downturn as far as it.
I wonder, though, because they required a ticket in order to get a campsite.
Did they?
Rogers did, yeah.
Oh, really?
So I don't know what that means as far as
I don't either.
You may want to call about your reservation and see if you still have it.
I'm going to do that, I think, at this point, but I'm site sharing with I have 2 sites, and I'm site sharing with 6 or 7 people, so that would be 6 or 7 other people who are now dumped from the site.
Oof.
And I mean, the other thing is, in my view, if Rogers were to refund this, that would constitute a breach of contract because the contract is with them.
Mm-hmm.
There's no mention of anything with Free State Project or an organizer or a single organizer having any veto say over, that. I know they try to claim that.
I mean, what contract though are you claiming?
He's contracted to buy that spot.
But do they not reserve the right to
spot.
kick you out if you break the rules or something along those lines?
I did look at the terms, and the only thing I can see is that if you break the rules, they can remove you. But there are contract laws and I guess traditions, you could say, that because I've made travel plans and stuff, you can't just cancel something on someone if they made, I could have spent like $1,000 on travel plans and stuff, and that you're now dumping me like this for no apparent reason. I mean, in some cases, you can be obligated or expected to provide alternative.
Yeah, I don't know what those terms are that exist, unfortunately. So I don't know. It would kind of be surprising if they did not have something in there that was sort of a catch-all to allow them to basically kick you off your site.
Yeah, I guess we're going to find out. I think it's an interesting question because years ago, the Porcupine Freedom Festival, when it was kind of in its decline, had locked down the campsite. They essentially campground. They owned all of the spots. You had to go through them essentially to get assigned things. They had security that was checking people coming into the to the campground, and then that went away. When the event kind of decentralized itself over the last several years. They got rid of the oppressive security feature that they had, and that allowed for anybody who wanted to come into the park and reserve a site without necessarily buying a PorcFest ticket. Now, what you're saying, Chris, is they've now started to require PorcFest tickets in order to reserve sites.
Yes.
I'm sorry to hear that. I did not know that. I don't know when that change was implemented, but
this year.
This year.
Yeah.
Okay. So there were a few years there where that wasn't wasn't a requirement.
They make that claim every
believe so.
year, and I don't know to what extent that's enforced.
Did you have to
Rogers,
show a ticket or prove when you reserved your site, Mikey, that you had a ticket?
I don't remember. Plus, they know me well.
Pretty sure
so
that I
it wouldn't
did.
be-
Oh, I can't speak to it
may
because we
depend on the
cut a
person,
deal
too.
directly with the owner of the campground, so we didn't have to show tickets in order to get that deal. But that may be different than the average person.
The other thing is I inquired with the organization about if there was some sort of contract between FSP and Rogers regarding this, and I did not receive. I was told I wasn't told anything. So my view is that there is no such contract, and if there was some sort of agreement or contract, that you would essentially have to disclose that to people renting.
You know, one of the things
the season.
I will say is that, the campground, Rogers, and I think in particular the Free State Project and organizers have not been very clear when they've gone and they've banned somebody as to what they have actually done.
Yeah, what's the mechanism? I mean, previously, I think this was
so much opacity.
Yeah,
I actually looked back at the old minutes of the board to look at your supposed ban and Cantwell's ban, and it's very vague.
Yeah, well, even then they had the whole board vote on it, and in this case, it doesn't appear there's been any kind of board action yet. This is just a unilateral ban by the organizer.
I've also heard that I think last year he tried to ban Rochelle Kelly, and this year Justin O'Donnell said they tried to ban him too. So it seems there's a lot of petty personal bannings here, and not like a.
I know I heard Justin O'Donnell is going to protest the event and not attend.
Yeah, it does seem like there's a lot of petty stuff that happens, with this, just.
I've never seen this before from any organizer before. This is just insanity.
I understand where Dennis is coming from. I mean, you can be, you can be a jerk sometimes, but I don't think it's appropriate to ban you from PorcFest the event, as opposed to a particular room.
Kick you out of a chat room, sure, but not the event.
It just sends the wrong message.
Yeah. Thanks, Mikey, for the call tonight. Appreciate hearing from you. We actually have somebody calling in here from Lancaster, New Hampshire. Caller, what's your name?
Francisco.
Francisco, you're on the air. What's on your mind tonight?
Hi. This guy seems like a big jerk.
Okay.
Mikey?
What's his name?
Mikey.
No,
Mikey?
the other guy.
Oh, the organizer.
No, the guy he's talking about.
Oh, Dennis. Dennis is the organizer of PorcFest this year.
Yeah, I've heard about this guy.
Mm-hmm.
He seems like a violent criminal.
Why do you say that?
If there was no state in Lancaster, New Hampshire, and someone came along and claimed that they had an authority to ban you from a private property that they did not own and had no contract to, and asserted that they would enforce that, what would that make them?
That's a good question.
I mean, the problem is that there probably is a contract of some sort. We just don't know what that contract is.
No, there isn't. There is not one. There is not.
Well, clearly there's a contract of some kind, because there was a contract between Mikey and Rogers, and there was a contract between the FSP and Rogers, because they're reserving they're reserving some sort of space for their events. I mean, obviously there is some sort of contract. The question is,
we all know,
what are those contracts?
Long-time caller here, a long-time listener, first-time caller, but I know all about this PorcFest.
Yes.
Okay.
I know the agreement is that this organization rents certain parts of the campground.
Correct.
This guy's violent. He's violent. He's a criminal, and anyone who talks to him should be excommunicated.
Francisco, are you going to be attending PorcFest? That's the question, though.
I'll be at PorcFest.
All right, look forward to maybe I'll see you there.
I don't have a ticket. So
All right, man. Hey, thanks for the call tonight. Out of time if you didn't get in tonight. We are back tomorrow. See you then. Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. Every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury. Anyone with one Dash to spend can put forward a proposal to the Dash masternodes to vote on. The masternodes vet the proposals and decide which ones move forward and are funded by the Treasury. In fact, that's exactly how we got this sponsorship. Nowadays, DAOs are plentiful, but Dash paved the way by doing it first, nearly a decade ago. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at Dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
There are basically two types of advertising: direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio